Lance Armstrong always feared a certain type of cyclist during the 7 years in which he dominated the Tour de France. That of the pure climber who could climb better than him on the hardest climbs of the Grand Boucle. It happened to him with the polytoxicomaniac Elephantino, whom he even bullied in the middle of the race. It happened to him with the cyclist who received almost €1 million from the Spanish state who called him a doper, Roberto Heras, a rider whom Lance signed and then cut his blood transfusions to stop him from flying in US Postal. It also happened with our protagonist of today, the Spaniard Iban Mayo, a key player for the friend of the snow, Jan Ullrich, to be really close to beating the Texan in the 2003 Tour de France. In an interesting interview for Jot Down magazine, the doped Basque rider who quit the sport almost 20 years ago after testing positive for EPO in the 2007 Tour talked about his career, and of course he was trying to clear his name. The guy who holds the record for the most doped ascent of Mont Ventoux in the Criterium de Dauphiné's history. But also the man who was the ambassador for the popular Basque bike brand Orbea, and he wanted to talk about professional cycling today and the huge doping that could exist in the big stables of the sports. Now, from this channel we know that few people can enlighten us more than dopers, as Jesus Manzano proved a few weeks ago. So don't forget, you can always help with a super thanks if you want more testimonials from these broken toys of the past. And now, yes, without further ado, let the show begin. The doper Rolf Aldag confessed that most Epoca dopers ended up falling into alcoholism and other hard habits, which resulted in those cycling monsters in the filth, begging money from whomever they can and being parasites on the society in which they live. But that was not the case with Iban Mayo. After being the first great Saunier Duval rider of Dracula Gianetti and moonlighting Machin to test positive for doping, he abandoned professional sport. And not only that, he also stopped being interested in professional cycling. Instead, Mayo preferred to take refuge in his beloved Basque country, where he was still a hero thanks to being the character that the old Miguel Madariaga and Dr. Jesus Losa used to be the protagonist of the Orange Tide of Euskaltel Euskadi, the same one used for political purposes to promote his beautiful Basque region worldwide. The then long-haired and recently retired athlete had no qualms cracking jokes about doping during interviews and making jokes about cheating to earn hundreds of thousands of euros. But not only that, it seemed to be part of the idiosyncrasy of the region. It seemed like a simple citizen living a quiet life far from the great luxuries of the superstars. And so, for the cycling fan and the people who'd only seen him in the newspapers for being a doper, he was someone close, and in general he had good press. The same press that always defended him when the evidence of his doping was more than evident. In this recent interview, the doper Mayo, already with much less hair on his head than during his golden epocha, complained angrily about what for him, and for the press of the moment, was an injustice, since he claims that he is the only cyclist in the world that, after a negative counter-analysis of his anti-doping sample, had another counter-analysis performed to confirm the doping of the first sample, and all this in the middle of the Tour de France. A false accusation by all accounts, as happened to Roberto Heras in 2005, and also happened more recently to Alberto Contretrol's Trek teammate André Cardoso in 2017, also for the same substance for which Mayo was positive, EPO. Now, with an account like this, you can tell that the Basque pedalist doesn't want to understand how counter-analyses work, and instead he's preferred to play the victim of a Masonic conspiracy. But just in case you don't remember, we can tell you why this doped man was caught cheating in the 2007 Tour de France. On the second rest day, which was a key day for energy recharges in cycling history, Mayo was subjected to a surprise doping control in Pau. And then the next day there was a Pyrenean stage near his native Basque country, and he tried to achieve a hilarious stage victory by attacking alongside Jean-Marie Leblanc's Great White Hope of 1998, the missing for years but rescued by Gianetti and Machin, Christophe Rinero. This duo attack by Saunier Duval came close, but UAE Team Emirates were ultimately shattered by the tactics of Visma Lease bike team, with the doped Danish chicken Rasmussen beating Alberto Contretrol on the final ascent of the Col du Bisque. Iban Mayo almost did it. He almost got back to the level where he'd crushed Lance Armstrong in the Dauphiné 2004, before the American blew the whistle and alerted his friends at the UCI of the improvements that the Euskaltel team was handling. Just at the end of the Grand Boucle, in 16th position, Mayo's doping positive was announced. And officially, he still hasn't lost his place, even though confessed dopers like Levi Leipheimer or the whoremonger Michael Bogarde lost theirs. A strange inconsistency from Omeri Sports. Still, Mayo asked for the counter-analysis of the positive doping. But as the French laboratory in charge of the samples was on vacation in August, they sent the sample first to Ghent. But they couldn't analyse it properly, and then, wait for it, they sent it to Australia, making more trips and amassing more air miles for Mayo's sample than Rasmussen himself that season when he wanted to avoid being hunted by the vampires of the UCI. Many journalists and the Spanish Cycling Federation itself defended Mayo after he tested negative in that counter-analysis. But the next day, Pat McQuaid counter-attacked and took the third sample, finding it positive for doping. That is to say, Ivan, if you had two counter-analyses, it was because of the bad work of the UCI, not because you were a clean cyclist, and the real evidence shows it. And the fact that you did not even fight for your innocence as others did, others who are now adored by the anchovies of the North Sea, such as the director of the Vuelta a Galicia. Don't try to clean your image 17 years later, Ivan. It doesn't fit. But still, nevertheless, we are very interested in what you say about cycling today. Mayo wrote for three teams, Benesto in his under-23 era, and the aforementioned Euskaltel Euskadi and Sodier Duval. He says good and bad things about the three teams in his interview with Jotdown, but we can say without a doubt that he has no relationship with any of them today. We don't have to hesitate to say that Eusebio Unzue and José Miguel Echevarri kicked him out of Benesto when he was injured, without even asking about his state of health. And we know that Mauro Gianetti and José Antonio Fernandez Machin are two snake charmers who will always tell you what you want to hear, but whenever problems arise, such as doping positives, well, they directly expel people from the team. And that's what they did with Iban Mayo. But they gave him a pat on the back. Mayo believes that this is precisely one of the things that has changed in cycling today. He says that teams no longer dare to expel riders on the results of counter-analyses for doping, something Richard Plurger knows all too well with Michael Hessman. According to Mayo, because the riders have united, not like in his epocha, where when one tested positive, the rest of the collective treated him as a stinker in a most hypocritical way. Now, according to us at Cycling Highlights, because the anti-doping laws are so lax, a rider who has been sanctioned for biological passport anomalies is allowed to ask for more than €300,000 from the state where he lives, and therefore teams are afraid of multi-million-dollar lawsuits from their riders. Possibly we're both right. Now, of course, what Mayo is right in pointing out is that, of course, he does not know if there is doping today. But all those who hired dopers in his epocha, such as Machin or Gianetti or Unzue, are those who continued managing the teams and earning hundreds of thousands of euros annually, while the dopers were in their homes or favourite bars. But all those directors and managers are still in the world of cycling and continue to make a very nice living from it. Mayo's words were as follows. What was always said was that the image had to be changed, that riders had to be changed. But then people are still there. If the same teams and the same people, the same director and the same manager, what's wrong? Don't they need to be changed? If the same people are still there and other things have happened, what conclusion do we draw? These may appear to be harsh words from a man who still harbours a grudge after 17 years, but at the same time, they do appear to be wise words. Mayo knows perfectly well how teams like UAE Team Emirates or Movistar move through the sewers of cycling. He knows what tricks the old druids have to tone up their athletes. Iban Mayo may never go to a Lance Armstrong podcast because he ruined your career, but, my friend Mayo, you don't have to. Just tell everything you know about the behind-the-scenes of cycling, so that you're not just the hero of the Basque people, but instead you can become the hero of a much larger part of humanity.